You know that moment when the person who's supposed to have your back stabs you right in it instead? Yeah, that was my 25th birthday dinner. Except it wasn't just any dinner. It was supposed to be the night my boyfriend proposed. And my mother? She decided that was the perfect time to tell him I wasn't marriage material, in front of everyone, with the ring literally in his pocket. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's got a funny way of showing you who you really are.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
My name is Sylvie Brennan, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was 24, working as a junior graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm in Austin, Texas, living in a cramped studio apartment that cost way too much, and dating Marcus Holloway, a software engineer who wore the same 3 rotation of button-downs and thought meal prep was a personality trait. We'd been together for 3 years. 3 solid, unremarkable, perfectly adequate years. I met Marcus during my senior year at UT Austin. He was the friend of a friend who showed up at a group study session for a class he wasn't even taking, armed with homemade flashcards and color-coded notes. Most people would find that annoying. I found it endearing. He was stable, predictable, safe. My mother, Patricia Brennan, loved him immediately. That should have been my first red flag. Mom had opinions about everything. What I wore, how I styled my hair, which friends were good influences, and which jobs were respectable. She worked as a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company, the kind of position that came with a corner office and a superiority complex. My dad passed away when I was 16, and since then she'd made it her personal mission to ensure I didn't waste my potential the way she claimed he had. Dad had been a middle school art teacher. He painted on weekends, played guitar poorly but enthusiastically, and made the world's best blueberry pancakes. Mom always said he could have been more if he'd just applied himself properly. I never understood that. He seemed happy to me. After he died, Mom doubled down on control. Every decision I made was scrutinized through her lens of what was practical and appropriate. When I chose graphic design over business school, she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. When I moved into my own place instead of staying home to save money, she called it financially irresponsible. When I started dating Marcus, though, suddenly I was making good choices. "He's going places, Sylvie," she'd say, sipping her wine on Sunday dinners. "Engineers are stable, secure. You could do a lot worse." The unspoken part was always there. You probably will do worse. Marcus fit into her world seamlessly. He showed up on time, complimented her cooking, and talked about stock portfolios and retirement plans like they were exciting topics. Meanwhile, I sat there pushing roasted vegetables around my plate, wondering when my life had become a performance I didn't audition for. But I loved him. I think I did, anyway. Love was supposed to feel comfortable, right? That's what everyone said. The butterflies fade, the passion mellows, and what you're left with is partnership. Compatibility. Someone who texts you reminders to pick up milk and doesn't hog the blankets. Marcus was reliable. After growing up with Mom's constant criticism and Dad's absence, reliable felt like enough. Our anniversary was coming up, 3 years together, and Marcus had been acting strange for weeks. He kept checking his phone nervously, making cryptic plans, and asking weird questions like, "What's your ring size?" and "Do you prefer yellow gold or white gold?" My coworker Jenna was convinced he was going to propose. "Girl, he's obviously planning something big," she said one afternoon, leaning over the partition between our desks. Jenna was 26, perpetually optimistic, and engaged to her high school sweetheart. She lived for this kind of thing. Anniversary dinner, fancy restaurant, suspicious behavior, that's proposal 101. I laughed it off, but privately, my stomach twisted into knots. Did I want to marry Marcus? I didn't know, and that felt like an answer in itself. He made reservations at Ember and Oak, this upscale steakhouse downtown with exposed brick walls and a waitlist that stretched for months, the kind of place you only went for major occasions. When he told me, his ears turned red the way they always did when he was nervous. "I thought we could make it special this year. Maybe invite your mom too, since she's always saying we don't include her enough." My heart sank. You invited my mom to our anniversary dinner? Well, yeah. I mean, she's important to you and to us, right? I forced a smile. Right, of course. That was Marcus, thoughtful in ways that completely missed the mark. He genuinely believed including my mother in our romantic anniversary dinner was a kind gesture. He didn't understand that Patricia Brennan didn't attend events. She dominated them. The week leading up to the dinner was a blur of work deadlines and mounting anxiety. I was in the middle of rebranding a local coffee chain, which meant endless revisions based on client feedback that contradicted itself daily. My boss, Derek, was the kind of guy who said things like, think outside the box, but rejected anything that wasn't exactly what he had already imagined. The logo needs more energy, he said, squinting at my screen. You said you wanted minimalist and clean. Yeah, but like energetic minimalism. I redid it 4 times. By the time Friday rolled around, anniversary dinner night, I was exhausted. I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what to wear. Marcus liked when I dressed classy, which meant nothing too trendy or bold. Mom preferred elegant, which translated to expensive looking and conservative. I settled for a navy wrap dress and nude heels. Safe, forgettable, exactly what they expected. Marcus picked me up at 6:30, looking nervous in a charcoal suit I'd never seen before. He kept fidgeting with his tie in the car. Are you okay? I asked. Yeah, totally. Just excited. For dinner. And stuff. And stuff? He cleared his throat. You look beautiful, by the way. I glanced at my reflection in the side mirror. I looked fine. Pleasant. Like someone's acceptable girlfriend. We arrived at Ember and Oak 15 minutes early. The restaurant was gorgeous. Dim lighting, soft jazz playing, tables draped in white linens, the kind of place that made you feel like you should be celebrating something important. Mom was already seated when we walked in, wearing a cream blazer and pearls, looking like she was attending a board meeting instead of a dinner. She waved us over with a tight smile.
You're late, she said, even though we weren't. We're early, actually, I said, sliding into the booth. She ignored me, turning to Marcus instead. You look handsome, Marcus. That suit fits you well. Thank you, Patricia. You look lovely. I ordered a glass of wine immediately. Dinner started pleasantly enough. We made small talk about work, the weather, a documentary Mom had watched about pharmaceutical regulations. Marcus was sweating, despite the air conditioning, and kept reaching into his jacket pocket before pulling his hand back out. I knew what was in there, and I knew what was coming. My chest felt tight. This should have been exciting. This should have felt like the beginning of something wonderful. Instead, it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion, inevitable and horrifying and completely out of my control. Then Mom looked at me with that expression I knew too well, the one that meant she was about to say something for my own good. Sylvie, darling, how's that coffee shop project going? Still struggling with it? It's fine, just normal client revisions. You know, if you'd gone into marketing strategy instead of design, you'd probably have more authority in those situations. Derek still walking all over you? My jaw clenched. He's my boss. That's kind of how jobs work. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Mom smiled. The kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. And that's when everything started to unravel. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The waiter arrived with our entrees, perfectly plated steaks and roasted vegetables arranged like art. Marcus had ordered the filet mignon, medium rare, exactly the way he always did. I'd gotten the salmon, even though I'd wanted the ribeye because Mom had made a comment once about red meat and cholesterol when you're getting to that age. I was 24. Apparently, that was that age. Mom cut into her chicken piccata with surgical precision, each movement deliberate and controlled. You know, Marcus, I've been meaning to ask you about your promotion timeline. Sylvia mentioned you've been with the company for almost 2 years now. Marcus brightened. He loved talking about work. Actually, I'm up for senior engineer next quarter. My manager says I'm on track, and the performance reviews have been really positive. Senior engineer? That's impressive.
Mom dabbed her mouth with her napkin. And what does that translate to financially, if you don't mind me asking? I nearly choked on my wine. Mom! It's okay, Marcus said quickly. He always defended her. It's about a 30% increase from my current salary, plus stock options and better benefits. Should put me around 6 figures base. Mom nodded approvingly. Smart, very smart. Financial stability is so important, especially when you're thinking about the future. Marriage, children, mortgages, it all requires planning. The word marriage hung in the air like a loaded gun. Marcus' hand went to his jacket pocket again. His face had gone pale, then flushed, like he was running a fever. This was it. I could feel it building. The big moment he'd been planning, the question he'd rehearsed in front of the mirror. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what I wanted to say. But Mom wasn't finished. Of course, it takes 2 stable people to build a stable life. 2 people who are equally committed to growth and responsibility. Something in her tone made my skin prickle. I set down my fork. What's that supposed to mean? She glanced at me, her expression perfectly neutral. Nothing, sweetheart, just making conversation. Marcus cleared his throat. Actually, Patricia, I wanted to talk to you about something. You know what I've noticed, Marcus? You're so put together, so focused. You have goals, ambition, a clear path forward. It's admirable, really. Thank you, Marcus said, confused but pleased. Which is why I think it's important for you to really consider what you want in a partner long term. Someone who matches your drive, your trajectory. The table suddenly felt very small. Mom, what are you doing? My voice came out sharper than I intended. She looked at me with those cool, appraising eyes. I'm being honest, Sylvie. Someone has to be. Marcus is about to make a very big decision. I can see it all over his face. And before he does, he deserves to know what he's getting into. Marcus looked between us, his hand frozen halfway to his pocket. I don't understand. My daughter is many things, Mom said, her voice steady and calm, like she was presenting a business proposal. But marriage material, I'm not sure she is. The words landed like a slap. The restaurant noise, the clinking silverware, the soft jazz, the murmur of other conversations, all of it faded into white noise. I stared at my mother, unable to process what I'd just heard. "Excuse me?" I whispered. Mom sighed, like I was being dramatic. "Sylvie, you're 24 years old and you still don't know what you want to do with your life. You're in a junior position at a mediocre firm, you can barely afford your apartment, and you change your mind about your career goals every 6 months. That's not... Last year, you wanted to freelance. The year before that, you were talking about going back to school for art therapy. You have no retirement account, no savings plan, and you still have student loans you're paying off at minimum increments." She turned to Marcus, her expression sympathetic. "I'm not saying these things to be cruel. I'm saying them because you need to understand what a future with her looks like." Marcus sat frozen, his mouth slightly open. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could feel was the hot rush of humiliation spreading through my chest, up my neck, into my face. "How dare you?" I managed. "I dare because I love you," Mom said simply. "And because I love you, I won't let you trap this man into a marriage you're not ready for. You're not mature enough, Sylvie. You're not responsible enough. You still act like a college student playing at being an adult." "Patricia," Marcus started, but she held up a hand. "Marcus, answer me honestly. Has she talked to you about financial planning? About where you'll live, how you'll manage a household, what kind of life you want to build together? Or does she just float through life waiting for things to work themselves out?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I shoved my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. Several nearby cables turned to look. "Sylvie, sit down," Mom said quietly. "You're making a scene." "Good," my voice cracked. "Maybe I should make a scene. Maybe someone should actually hear what you just did." Marcus finally found his voice. "Patricia, I think that might have been too harsh." "Was it?" Mom looked at him directly. "Or was it necessary?
Tell me, Marcus, were you about to propose tonight? His silence was deafening. I thought so. Mom folded her hands on the table. And I'm sure Sylvie would have said yes, because that's what she does. She goes along with what's easy, what's comfortable. But in 5 years, when you're ready to buy a house and she's still figuring out her passion project, when you want to start a family and she's not sure she's ready, when you need a partner who can handle adult responsibilities and she's overwhelmed by basic life decisions, you'll remember this conversation and you'll thank me. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of her. You have no idea who I am, I said, my voice shaking. You've never known who I am. You just know who you wanted me to be, and you've spent my entire life punishing me for not being her. That's not true. It is true. The words burst out of me. Nothing I do is ever good enough for you. I got a degree. Not good enough? Wrong major. I got a job. Not good enough? Wrong career. I found someone who loves me. Not good enough. I'm not ready. When will I be good enough, Mom? What do I have to do to finally be worth something in your eyes? Mom's expression didn't change. That was somehow worse than if she'd yelled back. I'm trying to protect you from yourself, the same way I tried to protect your father, and look how that turned out. The mention of Dad, the comparison, it broke something inside me. I grabbed my purse and turned to Marcus. He looked shell-shocked, still sitting there with his hand near his pocket, the pocket with the ring he was no longer going to offer. I'm leaving. Are you coming? He hesitated, for just a second, but long enough for me to see the doubt in his eyes. Long enough for me to understand that some part of him, maybe a big part, believed what my mother had just said. I'll call you later, he said weakly. I think we all need to cool down. That's when I realized he wasn't going to defend me. He was going to sit there with my mother and probably have a nice, rational conversation about my shortcomings. Don't bother, I said. I walked out of Ember and Oak with my head high and my dignity in tatters. I made it to the parking lot before the tears came, ugly and hot and furious. I sat in my car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for 6 months, and screamed. Just screamed until my throat hurt. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Let's talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. Not, I'm sorry, not, she was wrong, just wait until I'd calm down, like I was the problem, like my anger was irrational. I blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother's. Then I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours watching couples walk in and out of the restaurant, celebrating anniversaries and birthdays and promotions, all of them blissfully unaware that my entire life had just imploded. When I finally drove home, I had no idea what I was going to do next. I just knew that I couldn't keep living like this, performing a life that wasn't mine, trying to be someone I wasn't, shrinking myself to fit into boxes other people had built for me. Something had to change. I had to change.
I called in sick on Monday, and Tuesday, and Wednesday. By Thursday, Derek left a voicemail that was equal parts concerned and irritated. Sylvie, I get that you're under the weather, but the coffee chain revisions are due Friday and the client is breathing down my neck. I need you back ASAP. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. My studio apartment had become a cave. Curtains drawn, lights off, surviving on delivery food and whatever was left in my pantry. I'd watched the same true crime documentary 3 times without retaining a single detail. My phone sat on the coffee table, face down, vibrating occasionally with messages I didn't read. Jenna had texted 47 times. I counted. On Friday morning, she showed up at my door with coffee and bagels, refusing to leave until I let her in. You look terrible, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. Thanks. Really needed to hear that. She opened the curtains, and I hissed like a vampire. Sunlight flooded the room, revealing the disaster zone I'd been living in. Takeout containers, balled-up tissues, my navy dress from the dinner crumpled into corner where I'd thrown it. Jenna took one look around and sat down on my couch, patting the cushion next to her. Okay, talk. So I did. I told her everything. Mom's ambush, Marcus's silence, the ring that never left his pocket, the 2 hours in the parking lot. By the end, I was crying again, which I'd thought was impossible because surely I'd run out of tears by now. "That's the most messed up thing I've ever heard," Jenna said, handing me a napkin. "Your mom actually said that at your anniversary dinner?" Word for word. "And Marcus just sat there?" I nodded, blowing my nose. Jenna was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I be brutally honest with you?" "Why not? Everyone else has been." "Your mom's a nightmare. Like, clinically. But..." She hesitated. "Some of what she said, not the way she said it because that was cruel, but some of it, do you actually want to marry Marcus?" The question hung there. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I did, or I thought I should want to. But when he was about to propose, all I felt was panic." "That's your answer, Self. But what if Mom's right? What if I am just immature and irresponsible and can't commit to anything?" Jenna grabbed my shoulders. "Listen to me. Not wanting to marry Marcus doesn't make you immature. It makes you honest. And your career stuff? You're 24. You're supposed to be figuring things out. The only people who have it all together at our age are either lying or boring." I laughed despite myself. It came out watery and broken, but it was something. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Well, first you shower, because yikes. Then you decide what you actually want, not what everyone else wants for you." After Jenna left, I stood in the shower for 40 minutes, letting the hot water beat down on me until it ran cold. When I got out, I looked at myself in the foggy mirror. Really looked. My mom's voice echoed in my head. "Not marriage material, not responsible enough, still acts like a college student." But underneath the cruel delivery, there was a question worth asking. What did I actually want my life to look like? I'd spent 3 years with Marcus because he was safe. I'd taken the job at the marketing firm because it was practical. I dressed and acted and planned according to what other people expected. When had I last made a decision based purely on what I wanted? I couldn't remember. That realization felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at once. I picked up my phone. 53 unread messages now. I scrolled through them with my heart pounding. Most were from Jenna. A few from coworkers asking if I was okay. Nothing from Marcus. I had blocked him, and apparently he hadn't tried hard enough to reach me another way. 3 messages from my mother. I unblocked her number just long enough to read them. "Mom, I hope you've calmed down and can see I was trying to help you. Mom, you can't ignore me forever, Sylvie. We need to discuss this like adults. Mom, your behavior at dinner was embarrassing. I expect an apology." I blocked her again without responding. Then I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding for months. I looked at my bank account. Really looked. Mom was right about one thing. My finances were a mess. But not because I was irresponsible. I'd been paying for things I couldn't afford because I thought I was supposed to. The apartment I rented because Mom said living with roommates at my age was beneath me. The car payments on a vehicle I'd bought because Marcus said Civics with check engine lights were unreliable. The expensive dinners and wine bars and weekend trips because that's what couples did when they were serious. I'd been hemorrhaging money trying to live up to everyone else's standards. I made a spreadsheet. Income, expenses, debts, necessities versus luxuries. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, but I had a clear picture. I could survive on much less if I was willing to make changes. Big changes. On Monday, I went back to work. Derek looked relieved when I walked in. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Actually, I need to talk to you." We went into his office and I closed the door. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice." Derek's eyebrows shot up. "What?" "Sylvie, if this is about the workload, we can adjust." "It's not about the workload. I need to make some changes in my life, and staying here isn't part of that plan." "Do you have another job lined up?" "No." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. That's not a great financial decision." "Probably not," I agreed, "but it's my decision." For the first time in years, I felt like I was choosing something for myself, not because it looked good on paper or made someone else happy. Derek tried to talk me out of it, offered me a raise, suggested a sabbatical instead, but I'd already made my mind. I finished out my 2 weeks, tying up loose ends on projects and training my replacement, a recent grad who reminded me of myself 3 years ago, eager and anxious to prove herself. On my last day, Jenna took me to lunch. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, stealing a fry from my plate. "Honestly, I'm figuring it out as I go. I'm breaking my lease and moving somewhere cheaper. I'm selling my car and buying something used that I can actually afford, and I'm going to freelance for a while. Take on projects I actually care about instead of rebranding coffee chains for clients who don't know what they want." "That's terrifying." "Yeah," I said. "It really is. I'm proud of you, though. Takes guts to blow up your life like this." "I didn't blow it up. My mom did. I'm just rebuilding it differently." That weekend, I found a room for rent in a house share on the east side of Austin. 3 other women in their 20s, all working creative jobs, splitting a charming but slightly run-down bungalow with a big backyard. The rent was half what I'd been paying. I sold my car to a used dealership and bought a 2012 Toyota Corolla with 90,000 miles on it. It was silver and boring and completely paid off. I loved it. I packed up my studio apartment, donated half my stuff, and moved into my new room on a Saturday in late October. My roommates, Zoe, Riley, and Marissa, helped me carry boxes up the stairs and ordered pizza for everyone. "So, what brings you to the house share life?" Riley asked, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor while I unpacked. I considered the question. Fresh start, I guess. My life kind of fell apart recently. "Girl, same," Zoe said from the doorway. "That's basically all of our origin stories. Welcome to the island of misfit toys." They felt like my people in a way that Marcus's engineer friends and my mom's country club acquaintances never had. That night, lying in my new bed in my new room, I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I'd been avoiding this for weeks, but Jenna's question kept circling back. "What do you actually want?" I started writing. Not a business plan or a career roadmap or a 5-year strategy. Just thoughts. Dreams I'd buried. Ideas I'd dismissed as impractical. I wanted to do design work that mattered for nonprofits, small businesses with actual soul, artists who needed branding help but couldn't afford big agencies. I wanted to paint again, something I hadn't done since Dad died. I wanted to travel, even if it was just road trips to weird small towns in Texas. I wanted to date people who challenged me instead of someone who felt like a safe default. I wanted to figure out who Sylvie Brennan actually was when she wasn't performing for an audience. By the time I stopped writing, it was 3 a.m. I had 17 pages of raw, unfiltered wants and dreams and possibilities. It wasn't a plan, not yet, but it was a start. And for the first time since that disaster of an anniversary dinner, I felt something other than anger or sadness or shame. I felt hopeful. Freelancing, it turned out, was less freedom to choose meaningful projects and more begging for scraps on the internet at 2 a.m. November came with a cold front that made our bungalow's terrible insulation impossible to ignore. I sat at my desk wearing 2 sweatshirts, refreshing job boards and freelance platforms, watching my bank account dwindle with each passing day. The first month, I landed exactly 1 client. a local yoga studio that wanted a logo redesign. They had a budget of $300 and 17 opinions about font choices. It took me 40 hours of work. That's $7.50 an hour for anyone keeping track. I was. Maybe this was a mistake, I told Zoe one evening. We were in the kitchen, and she was teaching me how to make cheap but decent stir-fry, a skill I'd never needed when I was ordering takeout 4 times a week. The freelancing or the whole life overhaul? She asked, tossing vegetables in a pan. Both? Either? I don't know. I slumped against the counter. I thought leaving my job would feel liberating. Instead, I just feel broke and terrified. How long has it been? 5 weeks? Zoe laughed. Sylvie, you can't judge an entire career change on 5 weeks. That's not even 2 months. You're basically still in the tutorial level of this game. The tutorial level sucks. Yeah, they usually do. But it wasn't just the money, though that was certainly keeping me up at night. It was the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother. See, I told you, you're not cut out for this. You don't have what it takes to make it on your own. I'd applied to 23 freelance gigs in the past week alone. I got 3 responses, all rejections. Going with someone with more experience was the common theme. How was I supposed to get experience if no one would hire me? My portfolio was decent. I'd worked on solid projects at the marketing firm, but decent wasn't enough when you were competing against designers who'd been freelancing for years, who had testimonials and case studies and established reputations. I was nobody, just another desperate creative trying to make rent. By mid-November, my savings account had dropped below 4 digits. I started picking up shifts at a coffee shop called Groundwork, slinging lattes and cleaning espresso machines for minimum wage plus tips. It was humbling, especially when I ran into people I knew from my old job. Like Cameron, one of Derek's favorite clients, who came in on a Wednesday afternoon. Sylvie? He did a double take. I didn't know you worked here. New gig, I said, forcing a smile. What can I get you? Large Americano. He pulled out his credit card, clearly uncomfortable. So, you left the firm, right? Derek mentioned it. Yeah, went freelance. That's brave. The way he said it, brave sounded like a polite word for foolish. Tough market out there. My nephew's been trying to break into graphic design for 2 years. Still hasn't landed consistent work. Good to know, I said flatly, and handed him his coffee. After he left, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes before my manager knocked and asked if I was okay. The thing about rock bottom is you think you've hit it, and then the ground gives way again. In early December, my Corolla started making a noise that sounded like a dying whale. The mechanic, a gruff guy named Tony, who worked out of a garage that smelled like oil and cigarettes, gave me the bad news. Timing belt's going. Transmission's got issues too. You're looking at $1,500 in repairs, minimum. I didn't have $1,500. I barely had $500. What happens if I just keep driving it? Tony raised his eyebrows. You could blow the engine. Then you're looking at a new car, not a repair. I sold my laptop instead. Well, my good laptop. The MacBook Pro I'd bought 2 years ago for design work. I downgraded to a refurbished Dell that froze every time I ran Photoshop with more than 3 files open. The timing belt got fixed. The transmission didn't. Tony said I had maybe 6 months before it became a real problem. I had become my mother's prophecy, financially unstable, barely scraping by, making poor decisions out of desperation. The worst part? I couldn't even tell anyone how bad it had gotten. Jenna was planning her wedding, talking about floral arrangements and seating charts. My roommates were great, but they had their own problems. And I'd successfully burned bridges with the 2 people who used to be my support system, however toxic. I thought about unblocking my mom's number at least once a day. Then I'd remember her face at that dinner. Calm, certain, delivering her assessment of my failures like she was commenting on the weather, and I'd put my phone down. On December 10th, I got an email that made my stomach drop. The yoga studio client, the one who'd paid me $300 for 40 hours of work, had posted a review on the freelance platform. 1 star. Difficult to work with, didn't listen to feedback, wouldn't recommend. I stared at the screen, reading it over and over. We'd gone through 6 rounds of revisions because they kept changing their minds. I'd listened to every piece of feedback, even the contradictory stuff. I'd been professional and patient even when they were neither. And this was how they repaid me?
One review shouldn't have mattered. But when you're trying to build a reputation from scratch, one bad review is everything. It was the first thing potential clients would see. Proof that I was exactly what my mother said. Not good enough, not professional enough, not ready for the real world. I tried to dispute it through the platform. They sided with the client. That night, I lay in bed scrolling through job listings for graphic designers. Full-time positions with benefits and steady paychecks, and the soul-crushing predictability I'd walked away from. Maybe I could go back to that world. Maybe I could find another Derek, another windowless office, another parade of clients who wanted energetic minimalism. It would be so easy to give up. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Hey, Sylvie, it's Marcus. I know you blocked me, but I got a new number. Can we talk? My first instinct was to block this number too, but curiosity got the better of me. Me? About what? Marcus? About us. About what happened. I miss you. Me? You miss me or you miss having a girlfriend? That's not fair. You know it's not fair? Sitting there while my mother eviscerated me and saying nothing. I was in shock. I didn't know what to say. Your mom put me in an impossible position. I laughed out loud at that, a bitter, sharp sound in my dark bedroom. Me, you put you in an impossible position? Marcus, she called me unmarriageable. She listed my failures like a PowerPoint presentation. And you were worried about your position? I've been thinking a lot about that night, and about what your mom said. Some of it was harsh, but some of it was valid. You did quit your job without a backup plan. You are struggling financially. Maybe she was trying to protect you. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. From anger or hurt or exhaustion, I couldn't tell anymore. Riley wandered in wearing pajama pants and an oversized band t-shirt. You okay? I heard you moving around. Just dealing with some stuff. She grabbed the bag of chips from the counter and sat down at our rickety kitchen table. Want to talk about it? I surprised myself by saying yes. I told her everything, the whole sordid story I'd been keeping mostly to myself. The dinner, my mother's verdict, Marcus's silence, the desperate scramble to rebuild my life, the failing car and the bad review, and the ex-boyfriend who thought I needed to figure myself out before I could be worth loving. Riley listened without interrupting, crunching chips occasionally. When I finished, she said, Your mom sounds like a narcissist, your ex sounds like a coward, and that yoga studio can go screw themselves. Despite everything, I smiled. That's simple, huh? Yeah, actually. The complicated part is what you do now. She pushed the chip bag toward me. Are you going to let them be right, or are you going to prove them wrong? I don't know if I can. That's the doubt talking, and doubt is louder when you're tired and broke and scared. But here's what I know. You left a stable job because you wanted something more meaningful. You walked away from a relationship that was wrong for you. You're hustling, even when it's hard. That's not someone who can't figure it out. That's someone who's actively figuring it out. I wanted to believe her, but belief felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Christmas came and went in a blur of extra shifts at groundwork and avoiding phone calls from extended family who didn't know about the breakup or the life implosion. I told my Aunt Carol I had the flu. She sent me a care package with soup and tissues that I didn't have the heart to tell her I didn't need. The coffee shop was insanely busy between Christmas and New Year's, everyone caffeinating their way through family obligations and holiday stress. I pulled double shifts, my feet aching, my hands stained with espresso and covered in tiny burns from the steam wand. On New Year's Eve, while everyone else was getting ready for parties, I was wiping down tables at 9:30 at night. The shop closed at 10, and I'd volunteered to take the shift because it paid time and a half and I needed every dollar I could scrape together. There was one customer left, an older woman who'd been sitting in the corner for the past 3 hours, nursing a single cappuccino and working on something in a battered leather notebook. She had silver hair cut in a sharp bob, paint-stained fingers, and the kind of comfortable confidence that came from decades of not giving a damn what anyone thought. I'd noticed her before. She came in every few days, always ordered the same thing, always sat in the same spot by the window. "We're closing in about 20 minutes, I said gently, approaching her table. She looked up, and I realized her eyes were a striking pale blue. "Already? Time gets away from me." She started packing up her things, the notebook, a couple of library books, a pencil case that had seen better days. As she stood, one of the books slipped from her stack and landed at my feet. I picked it up, a biography of Frida Kahlo. "Good book," I said, handing it back. "Research," she said. "I'm teaching a workshop on female artists in January, trying to refresh my memory on the details." "You're a teacher?" "Was. Retired from UT 3 years ago. Art history. Now I just teach workshops for fun and work on my own projects." She extended her hand. "Vivian Reeves." "Sylvie Brennan." Something flickered in her expression. "Brennan? Any relation to Jack Brennan? He taught middle school art. Passed away maybe 8, 9 years ago?" My breath caught. "He was my dad." Vivian's whole face changed. "Jack was your father? My God, I knew him. We served on an arts education committee together back in the early 2000s. He was one of the good ones. Had this infectious enthusiasm about getting kids excited about creativity." She paused. "I was so sorry to hear when he passed." I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. Nobody talked about my dad anymore. Mom had essentially erased him from conversation, like acknowledging him was too painful or too inconvenient. "Thank you," I managed. He was great." Vivian tilted her head, studying me. "You have his eyes. Same color, same shape. Are you an artist too?" "I do graphic design. Well, trying to do it freelance. It's not going great." "Ah, the feast or famine lifestyle. I remember it well from my early days." She glanced at the clock. "Listen, I know you're closing, but would you want to grab coffee sometime? Actual coffee, not," she gestured around the shop, "work coffee. I'd love to hear what you're working on." I almost said no, almost made up an excuse about being busy. But something in her directness, in the way she'd mentioned my dad like he mattered, made me pause. "Sure," I said. "That would be nice." We exchanged numbers, and she left with a wave. I finished closing the shop, thinking about my dad, his paint-stained hands that looked like Vivian's, the way he'd encouraged me to draw and create without worrying about whether it was good enough. Mom had packed away all his art supplies after he died. I'd never asked where they went. Vivian texted me 2 days later. "Coffee this Saturday? There's a place near campus that doesn't make you work for your caffeine." We met at a tiny spot called Medici that had mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Vivian was already there when I arrived, reading a newspaper like it was still 1995. "So," she said, after we'd ordered, "tell me why freelancing isn't going great." I gave her the abbreviated version. Leaving my job, struggling to find clients, the bad review, the financial stress. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Can I see your portfolio?" I pulled out my phone and showed her my website. She scrolled slowly, examining each project with the kind of attention I hadn't received from clients who were actually paying me. She said, "Your technical skills are solid. Clean layouts, good typography, clear visual hierarchy, but it all looks the same. Safe, corporate.
Where's your voice in this work? My voice? Your perspective. The thing that makes your work yours and not just competent execution of a brief. She handed back my phone. This portfolio says, I can do what you ask me to do. It doesn't say, I have a unique vision that will make your project better than you imagined. I felt defensive. That's what clients want, though. They want someone who will follow their vision, not impose their own. Some clients, sure. The boring ones, the ones who will always pick the cheapest option or the safest choice. But the clients you actually want, the ones who will pay you well and appreciate what you do, they're hiring you for your brain, not just your hands. She took a sip of her coffee. What kind of design work makes you excited? Not pays the bills, not looks good on a resume. What makes you actually give a damn? Nobody had ever asked me that. Not Derek, not my professors in college, not Marcus when he'd politely nod through my work rants. I don't know, I admitted.
Yes, you do. You're just scared to say it because someone told you it wasn't practical. Vivian leaned forward. Let me guess. Your mother? I blinked. How did you... Because you mentioned your father with warmth and your career with apology. And I've been teaching for 40 years. I can spot a student who's been convinced their passion is impractical from a mile away. She sat back. Your dad, Jack, he fought that battle constantly. The district wanted him to teach practical skills, prepare kids for real careers. He wanted to teach them to see beauty and express themselves. We had many conversations about it. He never told me that. Probably didn't want to burden you with it, but he was always convinced that creativity wasn't frivolous, it was essential. He thought the world needed more people who could imagine things differently, not fewer. She paused. What would he tell you to do right now? The answer came immediately, in my dad's voice from memory. Make something that matters to you, Sylvie girl. The rest will follow. He'd tell me to stop playing it safe, I said quietly. So why aren't you? Because I'm broke? Because I'm already failing at the safe version? Because if I take more risks and it doesn't work out, I'll just prove everyone right, that I can't handle adult responsibilities, that I'm not cut out for this. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you about the worst year of my life? I nodded. I was 31. Got divorced, lost my adjunct teaching position, had to move back in with my parents in Waco. I'd spent the previous decade trying to be a serious academic, publishing dry papers, teaching survey courses, doing everything I thought I was supposed to do to succeed. And it all fell apart anyway. She smiled, but it was edged with old pain. I thought I was finished, that I'd failed at being a grown-up. What happened? I had a breakdown in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes of my stuff, and my mother, who was not a warm woman, said something that changed everything. She said, "You've been living someone else's version of success. Maybe it's time to figure out your own." Vivian traced the rim of her cup. So, I did. I stopped trying to impress tenure committees and started teaching the classes I wanted to teach. I started making art again. Weird, messy, personal art that would never hang in a gallery. I dated people I actually liked instead of people who looked good on paper. And slowly, over years, I built a life that was mine. Did it work out? I'm 73 years old, retired from a job I loved, financially stable, and still making weird, messy art in my studio. So yes, but it didn't look like success for a long time. It looked like failure and uncertainty and a lot of people thinking I was making terrible choices. I felt something crack open in my chest, a small tentative opening. What you're going through right now, it's not failure. It's the messy middle. It's the part where you figure out who you actually are when you stop performing for an audience. And it's supposed to be hard and scary and uncertain. That's how you know you're doing something real. I don't know if I'm brave enough. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, Sylvie. It's being terrified and doing it anyway. She finished her coffee. Here's what I want you to do. Go home and make something, anything, that you would create if money and clients and your mother's opinions didn't exist. Just make something true. Then show me. That's not going to pay my rent. No, but it might remind you why you started doing this in the first place. And that matters more than you think. We talked for another hour about my dad, about her workshops, about art and failure, and the long game of building a creative life. When we finally left, the winter sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that my dad would have loved. That night, I pulled out the cheap set of watercolors I'd bought months ago and never opened. I sat at my desk in my shared room and painted without a plan, without a client brief, without worrying if it was good enough. I painted my dad in his classroom, surrounded by kids and color and chaos. It was rough and imperfect and completely personal. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was making something that mattered. When I finished, I took a photo and texted it to Vivian. Her response came 20 minutes later. Now that's a voice. Keep going. So I did.
January brought freezing rain and a kind of clarity I hadn't expected. I spent 2 weeks creating a new portfolio, work that actually reflected what I cared about. I redesigned the branding for imaginary nonprofits, created poster series for causes I believed in, built visual identities for the kind of small businesses I wanted to support. None of it was real client work. All of it felt more authentic than anything in my old portfolio. Vivian met with me twice a week at Medici, reviewing my work with the sharp eye of someone who'd spent decades teaching students to see better. She didn't coddle me. She pushed, questioned, made me defend my choices and dig deeper into what I was trying to say. "Why this color palette?" she'd ask. "Because it feels right? Not good enough. What does it communicate? What emotion does it evoke? What does it say about the brand?" By late January, I had a portfolio I was actually proud of. I updated my website, rewrote my bio to sound less corporate and more human, and started reaching out to clients I actually wanted to work with: local nonprofits, sustainable businesses, arts organizations. The response was better. Not great, but better. I landed a small project designing materials for a community theater spring production, then another for an environmental advocacy group. The pay still wasn't enough to live on, but it felt like forward momentum. I cut back my shifts at Groundwork to 3 days a week. It was risky, but I needed time to actually do the design work, and I couldn't keep pulling 18-hour days between the coffee shop and freelancing. For the first time since the disaster dinner, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was figuring it out. Then February happened. It started with my Corolla. Tony had warned me the transmission was on borrowed time, and apparently time ran out on a Tuesday morning when I was driving to meet a potential client. The car just stopped, right in the middle of Lamar Boulevard during rush hour. Cars honked, someone yelled at me. I sat there with my hazards on, calling a tow truck and watching that potential client meeting slip away as minutes ticked by. Tony's verdict was delivered with the sympathy of a man who'd seen this movie before. Transmission shot. Replacement would cost more than the car's worth. You could try to limp along with a used transmission, but honestly, I'd cut your losses. I sold the Corolla for parts, got $400 for it. Austin without a car is doable if you live downtown or stick to the central neighborhoods. Our bungalow was on the east side, not impossible, but not convenient either. I bought a used bike off Craigslist and told myself it was fine. This was fine. People biked everywhere in Austin. Then it rained for 8 straight days. I showed up to meetings soaked and apologetic. I missed a deadline because I couldn't get to a client's office to pick up materials. The community theater project, which had been going well, fell apart when I couldn't attend a crucial rehearsal to take production photos. "We really needed someone who could be more available," the director said, her voice kind but firm. "I'm sorry, Sylvie." There went my best paying gig. Vivian loaned me her car for a week, an ancient Volvo that smelled like paint thinner and lavender. But I couldn't keep borrowing her car indefinitely. She had her own life, her own commitments. I picked up more shifts at Groundwork. Back to 5 days a week, sometimes 6. The freelancing momentum I'd built stalled out. I was too tired to do good work, too stressed to be creative, too broke to turn down the coffee shop money, even though every hour there was an hour not building my actual career. On Valentine's Day, because the universe has a sense of humor, I got an email from the environmental advocacy group. They were thrilled with my initial concepts, they said, excited to move forward. They just needed to wait until next fiscal year to allocate the budget. Translation: we're not paying you for the work you already did, and we might not pay you at all. I'd spent 40 hours on those concepts. 40 hours I'd carved out of sleep and sanity thinking this was the project that would finally give me breathing room. I sent a professional response about payment terms and kill fees. They replied with surprise. They thought this was spec work. Wasn't I building my portfolio? I wanted to throw my laptop out the window. Instead, I cried in the bathroom at Groundwork for my break, then went back to making lattes with a smile that felt like it was cracking my face in half. That night, Marissa knocked on my bedroom door. "Hey, can we talk?" My stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with, "Can we talk?" We sat in the living room. Me, Marissa, Riley, and Zoe. The house meeting vibe was unmistakable. So, Marissa started, looking uncomfortable. "My sister is moving to Austin in March. She needs a place to stay, and this is my house, so you need my room." I finished. "I'm really sorry. I know the timing sucks, but she's family, and she's going through a divorce, and I promised her." Riley jumped in quickly. "We've been looking for solutions. There's a studio opening up down the street next month, but it's $900 a month, which is more than I can afford. It's okay. I get it." And I did. It was Marissa's house. Her sister needed help. This was just how life works sometimes. No villains, just circumstances. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. I had until March 15th to find a new place to live. In Austin's rental market, with my current income, or lack thereof, that was basically impossible. I spent the next week scrolling through listings. Studios I couldn't afford, room shares with people who wanted first, last, and deposit up front, places so far from downtown I might as well live in another city. Jenna called during the spiral. "Hey, stranger, I feel like I haven't talked to you in forever. How's things?" "Great," I lied. "Really great. How's wedding planning?" She launched into details about bridesmaids' dresses and cake tastings, her voice bright with excitement. I made appropriate noises, genuinely happy for her, even as my own life crumbled.
"Oh," she said suddenly. "I meant to ask, are you bringing a +1? I need final head count by next week." The wedding. Right. June. I had agreed to be a bridesmaid back in November, before everything went sideways. "Just me," I said. "You sure? I thought maybe you'd be dating someone by now. What about that guy from the coffee shop you mentioned?" I hadn't mentioned any guy. She was confusing me with someone else, someone whose life was working out. "Flying solo," I said, focusing on my career. We hung up, and I looked at my calendar. The wedding was in 4 months. Bridesmaid dress, shoes, travel to Houston, where Jenna's family lived, hotel room, gift. I did rough math. At least $800 I didn't have. I could drop out, claim financial hardship. Jenna would understand. She was my best friend. But the thought of losing one more thing, of admitting to one more failure, felt unbearable. That weekend, Vivian invited me to her house for tea. She lived in an older neighborhood near campus, in a 1920s bungalow with a converted garage studio out back. Her living room was chaos. Books everywhere, paintings in various states of completion, vintage furniture that didn't match but somehow worked together. It felt alive in a way my mother's sterile, magazine-perfect house never had. "You look terrible," Vivian said, handing me a mug of chamomile tea. "Thanks. I feel terrible." I told her everything. The car, the lost projects, losing my room, the financial impossibility of being a bridesmaid in my best friend's wedding. Vivian listened, her expression thoughtful.
When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Can I tell you something that might sound harsh?" she finally said. "Why not? Everyone else has. You're trying to build a creative career while also trying to survive crisis after crisis, and that's not sustainable. You can't do your best work when you're in constant survival mode." She set down her mug. "You need stability, even just temporary stability, a foundation to build from." "I know that, but I can't afford stability." "What if you moved home? Just for a month, to save money, get your feet under you?" "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "Absolutely not." "Sylvie, you don't know my mother. Going back there would be admitting she was right about everything. I'd rather live in my car." I stopped. "I don't even have a car anymore." Vivian sighed. "Pride is expensive. So is my sanity." We sat in heavy silence. Outside, birds chirped obliviously. The afternoon sun streamed through her windows, illuminating dust motes and all my failures. "I have a guest room," Vivian said slowly, "and a studio out back that I barely use anymore. My painting has gotten smaller scale as I've gotten older." I looked at her, not sure I understood. "I'm not offering charity," she continued. "I'm offering a trade. You could stay here, use the studio for your work. In exchange, you help me with things: grocery shopping, yard work, tech support when my computer acts up. I'm 73. Those things are getting harder." "Vivian, I can't." "You can. And before you get precious about accepting help, remember that I'm getting something out of this too. Company. Someone to make sure I don't fall and break a hip without anyone knowing for days. Someone to argue with me about design principles over breakfast." She met my eyes. "Your father helped me once, years ago. Let me return the favor." "What did he do?" "Convinced me to take a chance on teaching a workshop that became my favorite class for 20 years. Small gesture, big impact." She smiled. "We pass it on. That's how it works." I wanted to say no, wanted to prove I could do this alone, without help, without admitting I needed anyone. But I was so tired. "Okay," I whispered. "Thank you." "Good. You can move in next week. But Sylvie," she waited until I looked at her, "this is a foundation, not a solution. You still have to build something from here. I'm just giving you stable ground to stand on while you do it." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I should have felt relieved, grateful, hopeful. Instead, I felt like I just admitted the deepest defeat, that I couldn't make it on my own, that I needed rescuing, that maybe everyone who doubted me had been right all along. That night, back at the bungalow, I painted again. Not something beautiful or inspiring, just darkness. Just the feeling of drowning. It was the most honest thing I'd created in months. Moving into Vivian's house felt like stepping into a parallel universe where failure wasn't shameful, it was just part of the process. She gave me the guest room upstairs, painted a soft yellow with windows that caught the morning light. The studio out back became my workspace. High ceilings, concrete floors, natural light pouring through skylights, and enough room to spread out every project without feeling cramped. "House rules," Vivian said in my first morning. "Coffee's in the kitchen by 6. If you're working late, don't feel obligated to be quiet. I sleep like the dead. And we eat dinner together at least 3 times a week. I don't care if it's takeout or fancy cooking, but we eat like humans, not animals grazing alone in our caves." It was the structure I hadn't realized I needed. The first week, I just existed. Unpacked my boxes, organized the studio, helped Vivian with errands. We drove to the grocery store in her ancient Volvo, and she narrated her opinions on everything from produce quality to local politics. She had a take on everyone and everything, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd stopped caring about being polite decades ago. I loved it. "So, what's the plan?" she asked over dinner one night. Pasta with marinara sauce that she'd made from scratch while I chopped vegetables. "Keep freelancing, build the portfolio, hope something sticks." "That's not a plan. That's a wish with anxiety attached." She twirled spaghetti around her fork. "What do you actually want to be doing a year from now?"
I thought about it. Really thought, instead of just defaulting to what sounded reasonable. I want to work with organizations that matter. Nonprofits, community groups, small businesses that actually care about their impact. I want to do branding and design that helps them tell their stories better. I paused. And I want to paint. Not professionally, necessarily. Just keep making personal work that means something to me. Good. Now we have something to aim at. Vivian pointed her fork at me. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to reach out to every nonprofit and community organization in Austin. Not with your portfolio, with your story. Tell them who you are, why you care, what you can offer. Make it personal, make it real. That's not how you're supposed to pitch clients. Says who? The marketing bros who taught you to be bland and professional? Screw that. People hire people they connect with. Give them something to connect to. It sounded terrifying. It also sounded right. I spent the next 2 weeks crafting personalized pitches, not templated emails, actual letters that explained my background, my father's influence, why I cared about the work these organizations did. I sent 37 of them. I got 12 responses. 8 were polite rejections, 4 wanted to meet. That was 4 more chances than I had before. The first meeting was with Austin Mutual Aid, a grassroots organization coordinating community support during crises. They operated from a cramped office that smelled like coffee and determination. The director, a woman named Kendra with box braids and tired eyes, looked at my portfolio on a laptop with a cracked screen. This is good work, but we have basically no budget. We're talking maybe $500 total for a complete rebrand. Logos, social media templates, website updates, the works. $500 for what would normally be $5,000 worth of work. I'll do it for $750, and you let me document the process for my portfolio, including testimonials if you're happy with the results. Kendra raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating up? Your work matters. I can't do it for free. I need to eat. But I can do it for less than market rate if we're both getting something valuable out of it. She smiled. Deal. I threw myself into that project like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. I interviewed volunteers, attended their community events, sat in on planning meetings. I didn't just design a logo, I created a visual identity that reflected who they were and what they stood for. When I presented the final materials, Kendra teared up. This is exactly what we needed. You got us. You really got us. She posted about the rebrand on social media, tagging me and gushing about the experience. That single post led to 3 more inquiries from organizations in her network. Momentum. Finally! I took on 2 more nonprofit projects, a literacy program and a community garden collective. The pay was modest, but the work felt meaningful. And each project led to referrals, testimonials, proof that I could deliver something valuable. Meanwhile, Vivian had me painting in the studio every Sunday morning. Not for clients, not for a purpose, just to create.
Your commercial work needs your artistic practice to stay alive, she said. Otherwise, you're just a machine executing tasks. And machines are cheaper than humans. I painted memories of my dad, his classroom, his laugh lines, the way he'd look at a sunset like it was a miracle. I painted the bungalow and my roommates. I painted Vivian in her chaotic living room, surrounded by her beautiful mess of a life. The work was raw and imperfect and completely mine. In April, something shifted. I was sitting in Vivian's kitchen responding to emails when a message came through from someone named David Chen at a mid-size marketing agency downtown. Saw your work with Austin Mutual Aid, really impressed with the strategic thinking and the execution. Would you be interested in discussing some contract opportunities? Contract work with an agency. Steadier income, better rates, the kind of safety net I'd been scrambling for. I scheduled a meeting for the following week. David's office was the kind of place I would have been intimidated by 6 months ago. Sleek design, exposed brick, everyone looking purposeful and caffeinated. But I'd spent months in chaotic nonprofit offices and community spaces. I'd learned that impressive aesthetics didn't always mean impressive work. We need a designer who can handle community-focused projects, David explained. A lot of agencies treat nonprofit work as charity or resume padding, but we want someone who actually understands how to connect with those audiences authentically.
That's my entire focus right now, I said. I can tell. Your portfolio, the new one, it tells a story. Each project builds on the last. You have a clear perspective. He leaned forward. Here's what I'm thinking. Contract position, 20 hours a week guaranteed, with potential for more. You'd work on our community engagement accounts. Pay is $40 an hour. I did the math in my head. 20 hours at $40, $800 a week, over $3,000 a month just from this contract. Enough to breathe. Enough to save. Enough to stop living in constant crisis mode. I'd also want to keep doing independent projects, I said. The agency work can't be exclusive. That's fine. We're not looking for exclusive. We're looking for quality. I extended my hand. Then I'm in. Walking out of that office, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year. Hope that wasn't fragile. Hope that had foundation under it. I called Vivian from the parking lot. I got it. The contract. Steady income. Of course you did, she said like it had never been in question. Now comes the hard part. What hard part? I just solved the money problem. Money was never the hard part, Sylvie. Now you have to figure out what you actually want to build with this foundation. Stability is a tool, not a destination. She was right, as usual. That night, I sat in the studio and made a list, not of what I should want or what would make me look successful, but what would make me feel alive. Work that mattered, creative practice that was mine, relationships built on honesty instead of performance, a life that would make my dad proud, not because of titles or income, but because I was showing up as myself. For the first time since that catastrophic dinner, I could see a path forward that was actually mine. It wasn't the path my mother had wanted for me. It wasn't the path Marcus had imagined. It was messier, riskier, less conventional. But it felt might. And maybe that was the only metric that mattered.
June arrived with heat that made the air shimmer and Jenna's wedding weekend in Houston. I drove down in Vivian's Volvo, she'd insisted I borrow it, waving off my protests with, "What am I going to do? Go joyriding? I'm 73. The bridesmaid dress fit better than it had at the final fitting. I'd lost weight during the crisis months, but I'd also gained something harder to measure, a kind of groundedness that changed how I carried myself. The wedding was beautiful. Jenna glowed in her dress, her high school sweetheart cried during the vows, and everything was Pinterest perfect. During the reception, I found myself genuinely happy for her, without the bitter edge of comparison that would have been there a year ago. "You look different," Jenna said during a quiet moment between dances. "Good different. Lighter, somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "This whole year has been a nightmare, but I think I'm finally on the other side of it." "Tell me everything." And I mean everything. I've been so wrapped up in wedding planning that I've been a terrible friend. So I told her, the abbreviated version anyway. The struggle, Vivian, the agency contract, the slow building of something that felt sustainable and real. "I'm so proud of you," Jenna said, squeezing my hand. "And I'm sorry you went through all that alone." I wasn't alone. Not really. I just had to find my people. That felt like the truth of it. My support system had shifted, rebuilt itself with people who saw me clearly and liked what they saw. Back in Austin, summer settled into a rhythm. The agency work was challenging, but manageable. I was designing campaigns for a youth literacy program and a climate action coalition, projects that used my skills for things that mattered. The 20 hours a week left room for freelance projects I could be selective about. I was still painting every Sunday. My collection of personal work had grown. Canvases stacked in the studio, visual diary entries of a year of transformation. In July, Vivian suggested something unexpected. "I'm teaching a workshop in August for emerging creatives, business skills, portfolio development, that kind of thing. I want you to co-teach it with me." I'm barely emerging myself. I'm not qualified to teach anyone. You just survived a year of freelancing hell and came out the other side with clients and contracts. You're more qualified than most. She gave me that look she'd perfected, the one that said arguing was futile. Besides, teaching forces you to articulate what you've learned. It'll be good for you. The workshop was held at a community arts center, 15 students ranging from college seniors to career changers in their 40s.
I was terrified walking in. Sure, I'd be exposed as a fraud who'd just gotten lucky. But when I started talking about authentic portfolios, about finding your voice instead of chasing trends, about building relationships instead of just collecting clients, the students leaned in. They asked questions. They took notes. One woman, maybe 22 with blue streaks in her hair, stayed after class. "Thank you," she said. "I've been trying to make my work look like what I think clients want, and it's been soul-crushing. Hearing you talk about doing the opposite, it's exactly what I needed." Watching her face light up with possibility, I understood why my dad had loved teaching. In August, something happened that I'd been simultaneously dreading and needing. I was at a coffee shop downtown, not groundwork, a different place, working on a laptop that didn't freeze every 5 minutes. I'd finally been able to afford an upgrade. Someone approached my table. Sylvie. I looked up. Marcus stood there, looking exactly the same haircut, same safe, buttoned down, same uncertain expression. "Hi," I said, genuinely surprised by how little I felt. No anger, no hurt, just nothing much at all. "Can I sit?" I gestured to the empty chair. He sat, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I've been meaning to reach out," he started. "I wanted to apologize for how I handled everything, for not defending you at that dinner, for listening to your mom instead of trusting you." "Okay." He blinked. "Okay? I accept your apology. Is there something else?" I guess I thought we might talk about what happened. Maybe try again? I closed my laptop, giving him my full attention. "Marcus, do you actually miss me? Or do you miss having a relationship that fit neatly into your life plan?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "That's unfair." It's a genuine question, because the person you were dating, the one who wore what you liked, acted how you expected, made herself smaller to fit your idea of a good girlfriend, she doesn't exist anymore. I'm not her. You seem harder now. I'm clearer now. There's a difference. I leaned back. "I hope you find someone who's actually right for you. But that person isn't me. It never really was." He sat there for another moment, then nodded slowly. "I guess I knew that. I just needed to hear it."
After he left, I felt lighter. Another ghost laid to rest. September brought a surprise. I got an email from an address I didn't recognize, but the name in the signature stopped my heart. Patricia Brennan. She'd created a new email address. The subject line read, "We should talk." I stared at it for 20 minutes before opening it. "Sylvie, I know you've blocked my other ways of contacting you, and I respect that you needed space, but I think enough time has passed that we should have a conversation. I'm still your mother. I'd like the opportunity to explain myself. Perhaps we could meet for lunch?" Mom. I showed it to Vivian over dinner. "What do you want to do?" she asked. Part of me wants to delete it and pretend I never saw it. And the other part wants to hear her out. Maybe. I don't know if she's capable of actually apologizing, but I pushed food around my plate. She's still my mom, and I'm tired of carrying all this anger. Then meet her, but do it on your terms, in a public place with an exit strategy if it goes south. I replied to the email suggesting a restaurant near campus for the following Saturday. Neutral territory. Lunch, not dinner, easier to escape if necessary. When Saturday came, I dressed in clothes I'd chosen for myself. A vintage band t-shirt, jeans that actually fit, canvas sneakers. Not corporate, not trying to impress, just me. Mom was already seated when I arrived, looking polished and composed as always, but there were shadows under her eyes I hadn't noticed before. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Let's skip the small talk. You said you wanted to explain yourself." She took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot about that dinner, about what I said and how I said it, and I realized I was cruel." "You were. I thought I was protecting you, protecting both of you from making a mistake. But really, I was trying to control you, the way I tried to control your father." The mention of Dad caught me off guard. He wanted to pursue art full-time, did you know that, before you were born? He had talent, real talent, but I convinced him it was impractical, that teaching was the responsible choice. And then he died, and I realized I'd spent our whole marriage trying to make him into something he wasn't, trying to make him safe and stable and predictable. And I robbed him of years he could have spent being fully himself. I didn't know what to say. When I saw you with Marcus so clearly settling, I panicked. I thought if I could push you toward what looked secure, I'd be protecting you. But I was just repeating the same mistake. She looked directly at me. I'm sorry, Sylvie, for that dinner, for all the years of criticism, for never seeing that you didn't need to be fixed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Thank you, I said quietly, for saying that. Can you forgive me? Maybe, eventually, but we're going to have to rebuild from here, with boundaries. She nodded. I can accept that. We talked for another hour, carefully, honestly, like we were learning each other's languages for the first time. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, but it was a start. Driving home, I thought about my dad, about how he'd navigated loving my mom while staying true to himself, about the quiet rebellion of painting on weekends, of making pancakes instead of chasing prestige, of showing me that a meaningful life didn't have to look impressive from the outside. That night, I painted him one more time. Not sad this time, smiling, covered in paint, exactly as I wanted to remember him. And underneath the painting, I wrote, "For Dad," who always knew I'd figure it out. 3 months later, I signed a lease on a small studio apartment near campus. Vivian had insisted I was ready, that I'd saved enough for stability, that it was time. "You'll always have a room here if you need it," she said while helping me pack. "But you don't need it anymore." And that's exactly how this was supposed to go. My new place was tiny, a Murphy bed, a kitchenette, one window with a view of a parking lot. It was mine, paid for with work I was proud of, filled with paintings I'd created and furniture I'd chosen. On move-in day, surrounded by boxes and possibility, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photo of my watercolor of Dad's classroom, which I'd given to Vivian months ago. This hangs in my studio now, so I remember what teaching is supposed to look like. Thank you for reminding me. I sat on my floor bed and looked around at my small, imperfect, completely authentic life. Not marriage material, my mother had said. She was right in a way. I wasn't the material for the kind of marriage she had imagined. Safe, conventional, a performance of success. But I was something better. I was Sylvie Brennan. Exactly as I was meant to be. And that was more than enough.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.